First, it was the type of murder scene that law enforcement never forgets. 3 young boys, all brothers, and all gone. Shot and killed execution style, murdered by someone they loved and someone they trusted, their own father. Now this father has escaped the death penalty by taking a deal from prosecutors. And tonight, we hear from the prosecutor revealing for the first time new details about that horrible day when 7-year-old Clayton, 4-year-old Hunter, and 3-year-old Chase were shot and killed by their father. It is a story that will break your heart and make you furious. We have all the details and all the fallout from this triple murder tragedy.
I'm Vinny Politan. Thanks for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. This story is one that has, I think, really impacted a lot of people. Every time you see or hear about what happened here, it strikes a chord. And I think it begins with the victims and who they are. These 3 little boys, Clayton, Hunter, and Chase. I mean, look at these kids. 7, 4, and 3 years old. And I know that 3- and 4-year-old are looking up to their big brother and trying to emulate. They want to be like him. He's kind of leading the path for his younger brothers. Probably a little rivalry going on there. But wow, how anyone could do anything to these 3 boys. You know there's something wrong with them. The question is, what is it that is wrong with them? But let's get back to Clayton, Hunter, and Chase. In their town, they were known for being a baseball clan. Even their sister played as well. But, I mean, these kids, they went and played. The younger ones would watch the older ones, and they tried to be just like them. And they were baseball kids, a baseball family. Like, this was what little boys should be doing. Going out with their friends, with their buddies, learning how to hit, learning maybe how to pick daisies in center field. If that's what you're doing, doesn't matter. You're out there being a child, having fun. And in this case, like all 3 of them get to play baseball and then come home and practice and talk about it. I mean, they loved baseball. They also loved their father. They absolutely loved their father. On the day that he came home from work and murdered them, when he first came home, what did those 3 boys do? They ran into his arms. They ran into Dad's arms. Why? Dad's home. Dad's home. And we love Mom. We love Mom, absolutely. We're with Mom all day. And now Dad's home. Wow. And what a moment for a father. How could this not be like the greatest moment of every day? You come home and your 3 boys are running into your arms? How does that get turned upside down? How on earth does that happen? So these boys who love their father are running into his arms, and then moments later, they're running for their lives from him as he's hunting them down and chasing them with a .22 rifle. And Mom and Big Sis are doing everything they can to try to save these boys. But they couldn't. They couldn't. So you know what happened in this case. He entered a deal. The death penalty is gone. But today, the prosecutor really opened up and gave us a lot of details that were likely a look at his opening statement for the trial, laying out all of the facts of this case and what happened. Like, what was the killer father doing that day? Who saw him? What did they notice about it? What did he say? Where did he go? So today, that press conference was held. I want to show it to you because there are so many moments that will have you scratching your head and wondering what exactly is going on. How did he go from waking up in the morning to then going home after work and executing your 3 little boys? So let's take a listen to the prosecutor as he lays this all out in a fashion that really is like an opening statement, telling you and me and the world the story of what happened to Clayton, Hunter, and Chase.
We're going to talk about the days leading up to the murders. 5 days before, on June 10th, 2023, just a normal day. Chad Doerman takes the three boys on an outing to a local dirt track to watch some races, and they had a boys' day together. Happy, content, with no indication of any trouble to come. He discussed with Laura that she and Alexis have a little shopping day together, a little girls' day, little boys' day, and that was done. On Sunday, June 11th, the defendant takes the boys fishing, just the defendant and the three boys. No reports of any abnormal behavior on his part. Later, after the murders occurred, Doerman provided conflicting statements about whether he slept well or if at all on Sunday night. Monday, 3 days before the killings, defendant goes to work as usual Monday morning. His co-workers do not notice anything unusual or abnormal about his behavior or his words. He later, again, gave conflicting statements about whether he slept or whether he didn't sleep too good that evening, Monday, June 12th, 2023. Tuesday, June 13th, he goes to work again as usual Tuesday morning. After work, normal conduct, normal behavior. He had some problem with his vehicle's headlights, and he works on those headlights. Later, again, after the killings, the defendant gave conflicting statements about whether he slept Tuesday night, but eventually indicates and admitted that he didn't sleep too good that night either, maybe just a few hours. The day before the murders, Wednesday, June 14th, 2023. The defendant wakes his stepdaughter up before he leaves for work, which is a highly unusual thing to do. He typically left for work at 4 or 5 in the morning. He wakes her up and tells her and apologizes for whatever I have done to you and for anything I've ever done to hurt you. The night before, Chad Doerman murdered his children, June 14th, 2023. It was normal. He went as he did and coached his boys, or actually Coach Clayton. He coached third base that evening. The entire family went to the ball game. There were no indicators that anything this horrible was about to occur. Later, some folks did notice that perhaps while coaching third base, he seemed a little distracted, but nothing concrete, nothing you could latch onto to gauge in any fashion what was about to occur. Again, later to law enforcement, he gave multiple reports that he couldn't sleep at all the night before he killed his kids. The day of the murders, June 15th, 2023. The defendant gets up, goes to work, arrives at about 7 a.m. On his way to work, and we know this because we have his phone, and we got all his phone records and all his search history. On his way to work, he searches on YouTube for a song titled Happy in Hell. I'd never heard of that song before this, but I've unfortunately become acquainted with it and the lyrics. Go ahead. I'm not going to read them, but here they are. Thursday morning. Again, the day of the murder. The defendant's boss does notice something abnormal about his behavior, but nothing to the point where he was alarmed to make a report or to call anyone. The defendant leaves work at around 9:30 a.m. and goes to Kroger off of Beach Mountain 5 Mile, 9:42 a.m. And again, some of this is known from the Kroger's parking lot video and the interior video of Kroger. 9:42, he arrives at the Kroger parking lot. 9:44, he enters Kroger. He's in the aisle by the vitamins and supplements. He walks over to the little clinic. He walks to the little clinic at less than 2 minutes pass, and he leaves without speaking to anyone at the little clinic. So why he went there and why he immediately left after a minute and a half, we can't answer that. We don't know. On the way home, he stops, buys a 16-ounce Bud Light, goes out to the shed behind the house. The family then arrives from running some errands, and the boys, happy to see their father, run to say hello to him. Just a normal afternoon or a normal morning, other than he came home a little bit early that day. He plays with the boys while Laura makes lunch. While eating lunch, oddly, the defendant says to Laura that this will be my last good meal. Having no information, no idea what Chad was contemplating, Laura begins to worry that this is a statement that he may be contemplating suicide. Shortly before he kills his kids, Doerman calls his father and makes the statement that Clayton is going to be the hardest one. Between around 1 p.m. and 3:30, the defendant spends the afternoon doing yard work, playing with the kids. Again, nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing to alert Laura that she needed to do something to protect the family. There was no information available to her. 3:30 to 3:45, he begins to read the Bible to Hunter. He's walking around the house with the Bible mumbling, "Chad knows what's right, Chad knows what's right." Shortly before 4 p.m., he gets into the gun safe, leaving it unlocked. Laura says, "You are scaring me." Again, highly unusual behavior. And Chad says, "I'm just playing around." Our position is he did this to, again, allay any fears or concerns that may build up in her about her safety, his safety, or the safety of the boys or Alexis. So he actively deceived her. 4 p.m. He's telling Clayton, Hunter, and Chase that he loves them and they did nothing wrong and that they are the best boys ever. Around 4 p.m. on that day of the killing, the defendant and Laura and all three boys go into the master bedroom, playing, have lunch, a little tired, lie down, concerned that vaguely in the back of her mind that he's going to do something to hurt himself. And suddenly, after lying down, the defendant jumps up, grabs the 22 rifle from the safe, and terror fills the room as Laura is screaming, the boys are screaming. Laura is frightened that he's about to kill himself. They're all trying to encourage him, telling him that they love him and beg him not to kill himself. Laura takes the phone out to call 911 to get some help there for Chad, who she believes is about to kill himself. He grabs her phone, throws it across the room, and tells her it's too late. He's not going to kill himself. It is too late to save those boys. Takes the rifle, points it at Hunter, and shoots him multiple times. Laura sees this. Alexis sees this. Clayton sees this. Chase sees this. Laura screams for the other children to run while she tries to render aid and eventually does call 911 after Hunter has been shot. Hunter was shot in the right arm, right torso, stomach area, and twice in the right side of his head. Anyway, Hunter was removed from the house by Laura. She tried to save his life. When you hear Laura tell him to run, Clayton runs out the back door. The defendant gives chase to Clayton. Alexis runs after the defendant in an effort to save Clayton. The unspeakable bravery of that, I cannot comprehend. But that's what this little girl did. While she's running to try to save Clayton, she observes the defendant raise his rifle, fire several shots, striking Clayton from some 50, 70 yards distance. Clayton's down, and the defendant walks up to him calmly and executes him with 2 bullets to the head. So after Alexis sees this, she knows that Chase is still running around crying. She hears him. She runs back into the house to grab Chase. She grabs him, flees the residence, and begins to run across the yard out towards the street with the intent to go to the firehouse, which is, in close proximity to protect him. So please don't shoot me, is Alexis, as Doerman is pointing the rifle to her head as she's holding Chase and is compelled to put him down. Alexis sees Chase. He runs to the trash cans of the driveway and attempts to hide from the defendant, a 3-year-old boy hiding from his father. Alexis runs to get help. At some point, the defendant points the gun at Chase's head and fires it, but the magazine is empty, so it's just a click, as I said the other day in court. At some point, he reloads. Laura, protecting Chase, is physically fighting with the defendant. As I said, as you're aware, the defendant bit Laura. In a desperate attempt to save Chase, she places her thumb over the barrel of the rifle and took that projectile in an effort to save Chase. But unfortunately, the defendant was not to be deterred. He prevailed in the struggle, had control of the weapon, and executed Chase in front of Laura. The defendant walks out to the field where he murdered Clayton, picks up his dead body of his 7-year-old son, and brings it back and lies it down next to Hunter. Then he brings Chase over and lies him down next to Hunter's body and Clayton's body, all while Laura is right there trying to render aid.
When you hear what this prosecutor was describing, Mark DeCulvey, who's been amazing from the beginning in this case, you get a much better sense, I think, of why there was no trial and why there was a plea. Because that teenage girl, that young girl, Alexis, and her mom would have to relive that day in a hearing to determine his mental capability to face the death penalty one time, and then at a trial a second time, with no guaranteed result of what that would be. Now, this prosecutor also played pieces of the 911 calls that were made by Mom. We chose not to play them. It was literally too much. Too much. But you listen for 5 seconds and you understand why you would never, ever want to put that mom through that moment ever again. So they didn't, and they chose not to. And it's a tough choice, but it was the right choice. It really was, because we really have a true understanding of the level of terror that day, because you hear it in her voice. She makes the 911 call as her other 2 boys are being chased and murdered. So that's what we learned today. We learned a lot more details. Like, there's still a lot of questions, right? Like, why, how? We're gonna break all of that down. We're gonna bring in our think tank tonight to take a look at all of those issues and try to make some sense of what happened today and what happened in this case. I don't know if you can, but we're gonna try. Then we've got something else coming up next hour.
Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, we return to the scene of the brutal murder of 4 University of Idaho students, and we'll speak live with the mother of one of the victims, Kaylee Gonzalez.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan
In every story, in every trial, every case, there's at least 2 sides to it.
to dive into the latest
Oh my God.
and breaking true crime stories.
This was a very targeted, very personal attack.
Inside
I've never seen that in Discovery. I've been incarcerated 3 years.
and outside of the courtroom.
She's a psychopath.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
As to count 1, aggravated murder in violation of 290301A, an unclassified felony. How do you plead?
Guilty.
Count 2, aggravated murder in violation of 290301A, an unclassified felony. How do you plead?
Guilty.
Count 3, aggravated murder in violation of 290301A, an unclassified felony. How do you plead?
Guilty.
Count 18, felonious assault in violation of 290311A2. How do you plead?
Guilty.
And count 20, felonious assault in violation of 290311A2. How do you plead?
Guilty.
He pleaded guilty. He got a deal. They took death off the table, so it's a bunch of consecutive life sentences. He's not getting out. There was clearly something wrong with him, though, right? Someone doesn't just do that. It doesn't make sense that anyone who is normal would do that with your own children. It made no sense, even to the family and to the prosecutor describing everything. But Laura Barron Allen, one of the other prosecutors on the case, talked today at that hearing about his mental state and this mental illness defense, because we knew that's where they were going. But there was supposed to be a hearing this week about his mental illness and whether it was serious mental illness that would prohibit the state from seeking the death penalty against him. So let's take a listen to Laura Barron Allen, another one of the prosecutors in the case, talk about those legal issues related to his alleged defense in this case.
So in March of this year, the defendant filed a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. In Ohio, in order to prevail on that kind of plea, it would be the defendant's burden to show or to prove that at the time of the offenses, he had a severe mental disease or defect, and that he did not know as a result of a severe mental disease or defect the wrongfulness of his actions. The defense subsequently to their expert rendering that opinion also filed a motion under revised code section 2929.025, the serious mental illness statute, which is relatively new in the state of Ohio, just beginning in 2021. And under the serious mental illness statute, again, the defendant would have the burden of showing by preponderance of the evidence that he has been diagnosed with one of 4 mental diseases: schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder, or delusional disorder. If an expert opines that he has in fact been diagnosed with one of those mental diseases, then he would also have to show that at the time he committed the offenses, that the condition with which he's been diagnosed significantly impaired his ability or capacity to exercise rational judgment in relation to, first, conforming his conduct with the requirements of law, or second, appreciating the nature, consequences, or wrongfulness of his conduct. One of the things that all of the experts considered here is that prior to June 15th of 2023, the defendant was never diagnosed, treated, or prescribed any medication for any mental health condition. The expert hired by defense counsel in this case was Dr. Robert Stenson. The court's expert as to the question of not guilty by reason of insanity, and commonly referred to as NGRI, was Dr. Emily Davis. Despite the defense's contention, the experts did not agree on whether or not the criteria of NGRI, that the defendant met the criteria for NGRI. Both doctors, both Dr. Davis and Dr. Stenson, indicated that it was likely at the time of the offenses the defendant did suffer from a mood disorder. Could have been depression, could have been anxiety, could have been anything or nothing. They really weren't sure. But where the two experts differed was that Dr. Davis opined that the defendant did not meet the criteria for NGRI because he did know the wrongfulness of his actions. Dr. Davis specifically opined that with all of the information considered and reviewed, it was her opinion that despite the defendant experienced some symptoms of severe mental disease, that it was her opinion that he continued to know the wrongfulness of his behaviors in the offenses charged. Although some collateral records suggest a delusional thought process that served as motivation, such as when the defendant claimed he believed he was in hell at the time, there are also behaviors demonstrated by the defendant and commentary that he makes around the time of the offenses, which indicated he continued to know the wrongfulness of his actions.
Few legal issues we got to go through here, so let's bring in our think tank. Joining us tonight, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Al Wunsch III. Also with us, criminal defense attorney Darnell Crosland and family law attorney Jennifer Brand. Thank you, everyone. Al, I'll begin with you on the plea. To me, the plea was the right thing to do here, so that daughter and mother would not have to get up there and testify at least twice. At least twice in this case. His confession was suppressed, so they needed that testimony to prove their case.
Yes, and it would have been a horrible thing. I mean, this is such a heinous crime that, you know, it would have been despicable to have to put the family through that, his stepdaughter and his wife through that the horrendous day time and time again. And I mean, we knew what was going to happen. I mean, he was going to be found guilty. It was just a question of where they're going to have to go through this and live through this. But, you know, Vinny, what was interesting was that, you know, he was listening to the song Happy in Hell.
Yeah.
By I believe it was by Colt Ford, who's a Georgia guy from Athens, Georgia. And this is the refrain on the song. And when it gets 22, damned if I don't, damned if I do, I'm in love with another girl, and I've been dreaming in another world. I've been living with the devil while I'm creeping with an angel. All's well that ends well, I guess I'll be happy in hell. And wasn't it a 22 that he used to execute his children?
It was.
And right down the line, I mean, I wonder if this was done because he loved somebody else and he wanted to leave his wife or something along those lines. Because that's what this song is about.
That's what the song's about. But we didn't hear any evidence of any of that. Darnell?
And that's the whole thing.
Darnell, mental illness versus legal insanity, two different things. I mean, you look at him in court. He knows everything that's going on in court. He went to Kroger that day. He's doing things. Everything seemed relatively normal, but clearly there was something wrong with him. The experts don't agree. What are your thoughts about mental illness versus legal insanity in this case?
Well, I mean, when you look at the setup here, it's very difficult. And I think the only people that go crazy are the people such as you and myself trying to figure out what happened here. When you have people who do this type of thing, and they blame it on the church, or they blame it on some biblical scripture, or something that we can at least have a starting point to assess their mental position. Here, we don't have any of that. I mean, it seemed like when the prosecutor did a great job breaking his day down, or 24 hours down leading up to this, it seemed like there was some indication that there was some mood issues, but his wife didn't call the 911 right away because, you know, he wasn't crying or, you know, saying he's going to kill himself.
She was about to, and then he knocked the phone out of her hands, and then went and said, "No, it's too late. I'm going after. It's too late for the boys." And then at that moment, they realized, "Oh my goodness, this isn't suicide. This is going to be a murder."
Exactly, but you normally get some signs way before that moment where it went down. So he did a good job of masking that. So it's clearly not NGRI here, and the other prosecutor broke that down. So it's very difficult here, and I don't have any empathy for this guy. This is the first time I actually was upset that they gave him water in the courtroom. I mean, this guy didn't deserve to be treated like a human at all, because he can't even say he's crazy, or excuse me if that's politically incorrect, but if he has a mental defect, we don't have any of that. He just seems to be a madman.
There's no history. Jennifer Brandt, we look at what was happening in the buildup to this. A few nights, seemingly with lack of sleep, he went to this medical clinic at Kroger, walked in for like a minute and a half. I guess no one was there, then turned around and walked out. I don't know if that was going to be his last-ditch effort to try to get some help at Kroger. You know, near the pharmacy, they have one of those little clinics. Yeah. I'm not sure. I think the why of this is still unanswered tonight.
Absolutely. And I mean, he was thinking about it and he was contemplating this. So it's not something that he just decided the moment of, or just pulled out his gun and decided to shoot these boys. I mean, it sounds like it was somewhat in his mind, something he had been thinking about for some time. He lined everything up. I mean, maybe he was going to Kroger in a last-ditch effort to try to get some help, but he didn't. He didn't seek help. He didn't tell anybody, although he called his parents, I believe, and he said something to them. He said certain comments to his wife about, you know, his last meal and that kind of thing, woke up his stepdaughter. So these were things that he was thinking about in his mind. He wanted to kill these boys. Who knows? He's certainly sick, but you know, whether he was not guilty by reason of insanity, I don't think so, because he knew what he did and he knew that it wasn't the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think the only thing that would have happened at a trial was to further torture and torment the survivors.
Can't even imagine.
Mom
Horrible.
and her daughter, big sis.